Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Jose. First of all, I would like to thank our briefers today, Mr. Chudong Yu, David Beasley, and Young Egeland. We're also very much honored by the intervention of Dominican Republic Foreign Minister. Today's meeting tackles the critical issue of conflict-induced hunger. Its importance cannot be overestimated. We would like to appreciate the efforts by the Dominican Presidency of the Security Council to coordinate the views of the Council members and to reflect them in the PRST. It is certainly not an easy task, and we still have some way to go in order to come to a sustainable consensus. Having said this, we have to repeat our fundamental position that the Security Council is not the right platform to sustainably embrace and address all the socio-economic and other factors which are related to armed conflicts. We have to be honest to each other and do our best to deal with the issues of peace and security here. This is a well-known distribution of labor within the UN system defined by the Charter that we all need to respect. Discussion or not discussion of an issue in the Security Council should not be criteria of its importance. We also believe that the discussion, wherever it takes place, will not be successful if we ignore the root causes and try to pretend that symptoms are more important than the disease itself. The food security problems of countries in armed conflict is indeed complex and multi-angle. But one of the key root causes, which is often omitted by some of our colleagues, is foreign interference in the internal affairs of states that provokes conflicts and risks to national food security. A vivid evidence of what we all can see every day on the examples of Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen. All of them have become an arena for foreign interference or even settling scores between external players. This must be stopped if we don't want to see a further increase in humanitarian assistance requests, most of which are just to ensure the basic food requirements of the civilians. The medical consequences of a lack of balanced food, especially at a young age, may irreversibly affect health of future grown-ups. The generation of children of hunger wars is growing in our plain view, and this is extremely alarming. Yemen is the largest humanitarian catastrophe of our times, where 2/3 of the population are in need of humanitarian assistance. Half of them are children. In Syria, more than 11 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. Having all the internal resources for independent development and ensuring the normal life of their citizens, this country is forced to rely on international, in particular food humanitarian assistance. The terms of provision of humanitarian aid are discriminatory and often preconditioned with the regime change. The role of cross-border mechanism is artificially exaggerated at the expense of the existing feasible alternatives provided by Syrian government. Example of this we heard at this today very VTC. Iraq and Libya are also in very difficult situation, struggling to bring life back to normal after unlawful foreign interventions. Mr. President, we do understand that climate change issue is very trendy now, and there is always a temptation to insert it into every discussion. But we need to be frank with ourselves and not to exaggerate its significance for every crisis. Otherwise, we risk to never find right solutions to the issues we face. The expert discussion on the draft PRST revealed that discrepancies on this issue will not bring us to sustainable remedies of the problems of hunger if we continue to ignore the mentioned root causes. Important things that have to be an integral part of solutions very often are left outside of the scope of our discussions. Creating opportunities and capacities for local production, stabilizing global commodities markets, trade liberalization, and mitigation of the consequences of natural disasters can reanimate economies ruined by armed conflicts. And one of the most important and obvious ways to address the root causes is to remove unilateral restrictive measures and lift unilateral sanctions. This is a laborious process, but until we take this path, humanitarian needs will only grow. Using medical terminology, the humanitarian assistance is only able to alleviate symptoms, but not cure the disease. We urge our colleagues to embrace these vital ideas that will help us to make the text of the draft PRST acceptable for everybody. Mr. President, the Russian Federation pays great attention to the provision of food assistance to countries in situations of armed conflict. The humanitarian assistance addressed to such states is regularly provided by our country, both through bilateral channels and through the United Nations World Food Programme. Every year we spend more than $40 million on these purposes. WFP's logistics delivery network allows us to be sure that assistance reaches the most vulnerable recipients. Other specialized UN agencies and platforms continue to play a crucial role in addressing various issues of socio-economic nature. Among them, on top of the WFP, the FAO, IFAD, where we are devoted to most effective decision-making process in the governing boards of these agencies. We are also convinced that we have to explore the potential of respective discussions under the auspices of UNGA and ECOSOC. I thank you, Mr. President.
The statement of the Russian Federation. I give now the floor to the representative of